start. Okay, welcome everyone again, and thank you very much for joining us for our second to last in our this year's webinar series. Thanks for joining today. Today is a Social Enterprise Day, and it's obviously Global Entrepreneurship Week, so thanks to everyone who's taken the time to participate, and hopefully you will find the next hour really useful and valuable for yourself and for those of you who are developing social enterprises. So my name is Marika. I work at UnLtd in our volunteering and pro bono team, and our role is really to broker different types of expert support to the social entrepreneurs that UnLtd works with. So normally that takes the form of mentoring or workshops, but can also be in the form of online webinars such as these. I'm really delighted to welcome back a long-term friend of UnLtd, Simon Bucknall. Simon has done a webinar for us before, and he's going to be spending the next 45 to 50 minutes talking to you and sharing his insights on pitching and presenting. And Simon runs a coaching consultancy called The Art of Connection, and I'm sure he'll introduce himself much better than I do, but Simon is a real sort of master public speaker, but even more so what's really special is his ability to actually teach others and share his knowledge and his expertise with other people. So really help entrepreneurs and other professionals with their communication skills, helping them to connect and influence and inspire those around them. So big thank you to Simon, and I will hand over to him in a couple of minutes. Just a couple of quick sort of practical issues. So the webinar itself will last about 45 to 50 minutes, like I said. We will have time for questions at the end. We'll have about 10 minutes hopefully for questions. And the way you can submit questions is on your webinar dashboard. You will see a chat function, hopefully. So just type in your questions in there. I will make a note of those, and then when we come to the end, I will read those out, and then Simon can answer. So do keep your questions coming throughout, and we'll take the time to go through those at the end. But for now, that's, I think, enough for me, and over to Simon. Thank you.
Marika, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone out there. Welcome. Just to reassure you on a couple of things. First of all, no, my hair does not look like that in real life, in case you were wondering, nor do I dress like that normally. But I was saying to Marika just before this call started that it looks quite fun. Whether you'll get a sense of fun from the next 45 minutes or not, I don't know. But certainly I feel confident that you'll get something very, very worthwhile from it. When Marika said the next 45 to 50 minutes, and here's the second thing to reassure you on, I thought to myself, God blimey, when you say it like that, 45 minutes, it seems like rather a long time. So my job really is to ensure that the next 45 minutes flies by, so that you are immersed in it and not thinking about, whether it's time for lunch or it's time to take a break. And the key to that really is to focus on very simple, practical things, whether they are actual techniques or insights that can make a difference to how you pitch yourself, a product, a service, or indeed perhaps an enterprise or a project in which you are seeking either investment, or perhaps you're seeking to attract volunteers, or simply build footprint. And we do face a challenge, each and every one of us on this call. I imagine we have a fair number of social entrepreneurs on the call, perhaps entrepreneurs who are in the for-profit sector, or indeed perhaps you don't run your own enterprise, you may be in some other sort of role but thought this sounded interesting. The challenge we face is that when it comes to spoken communication, so much of it is characterized by this kind of thing. Is that familiar? This was a slide that was presented to me some years ago by an agency, and I just looked, I just thought, what on earth am I supposed to do with this? What a nightmare. Very numerate, very rational, very cold, frankly. And I looked at this and I remember thinking, I have no idea what I'm supposed to make of this. Or you get communication that's a bit like this, either in terms of the nature of the slide or the way in which it's talked about. You know, it's all very rational, it's all very sensible and logical. Engagement rings cost $5 and whatever, $5, $5,200, whatever it is. And it's all done very factual, very rational, and it's not very engaging. And my guess is that you will have had at least some experience having to pitch, as I say, yourself or perhaps a product or service. If you've ever been interviewed for a job, for example, or perhaps you interviewed for work experience or maybe for college or whatever, you'll know what it can be like. Trying to engage other people's attention is hard, and just giving facts isn't enough. It's not enough to just give rational evidence. Engaging people is about more than that, and really what this 45-minute piece is about is looking at simple things that you can do to convert the personality, if you like, the engagement quota or quotient of your communication, so that it's a bit less like this, what you see on the screen, and a bit more like that. Isn't there a difference? Just look at the energy in that photograph. Same subject, they're both talking about engagement, but look at the difference between that and that. So think of this in a way as being about bringing value, bringing your ideas to life, so that other people really are hooked in it, hooked into it. That's really what this is about. And in a way, another way of thinking about it is in relation to the world of the elevator pitch. That is an anecdotal thing, came out of the US some time ago, about the idea of if you were stuck in a lift for 30 seconds with, who knows, Bill Gates or, I don't know, Richard Branson, and they said to you, you know, so what do you do? How compelling would you be? Now, frankly, I don't meet many people who get stuck in elevators for 30 seconds with Richard Branson, but still, it's not a bad principle to ask yourself, well, what would you say if you only had 30 seconds to pitch yourself, or to pitch an idea, product or service, or your enterprise, but whatever it is? What would you say? And let me suggest here that you'll get the most out of this this session and the techniques as we run through if you have in mind something specific. Just focus for a moment and have a think about what is most relevant for you when it comes to pitching. Is it yourself, you as a person? Is it your social enterprise? Is it a particular product or service? And let me invite you to use the chat function at this point. I'll check in a short while with Marika on this. But let me ask you just to ping through to Marika what it is that's most relevant for you, just so that we get a bit of a flavour of what's out there. So if it's, you know, you're running a social enterprise project for, I don't know, communication skills for women, then write that. If it's you've got some fabulous product you want to pitch, then just write that, what that is, and just ping it through, and hopefully Marika will get, in the next couple of minutes, we'll just get a bit of a cross-section of the sorts of things out there that you are looking to pitch, because presumably in choosing to invest time in being on this call, there's a reason. There's something which you are looking to pitch more effectively. Now, obviously, I can't see you right now, although I'm looking forward to getting some feedback through from you and obviously questions too. So since we're not actually live in a room together, what we'll do as we run through the techniques here is by way of a demo, I'm going to use just an example of my own, the kind of thing that I do, go out there and pitch, if you like, which relates to both me as a speaker and also the business that I run, the Art of Connection. In some ways, I'm an unlikely person to be running this webinar. Some years ago, if you've been with me, you'd have seen me having a panic. I was at my leaving drinks for my first job, and I had a total panic because I hadn't prepared a speech and I was asked to give one. And it was so painful. I remember making a decision, I've got to get better at this. So I joined a public speaking club, and 6 years later was in the finals of the World Championships of Public Speaking. No, I don't say that to try to impress you, but to say that I went on a journey over that time, and some of the things we look at in this session are drawn from that experience. What made the difference from me hyperventilating over a desk in front of my colleagues back in May 2001 through to succeeding in representing the UK and Ireland in the World Championships 5 years later. More importantly, in a way, for pitching, what's happened since, the experience that I've gained from having to engage audiences in my own content, which is all around public speaking, but also engaging people in the value that I personally and the business that I run offers. So we'll use that as an example just so you can see how I have built up the pitch, if you like, and so you can see it for real. But in the meantime, I'd love for you to have in your mind the one thing that's most relevant for you, hence focus. Okay? So to give a bit of structure for this, we're going to give really an introduction to a simple process that I put together, which I like to call the pitch process, P.I.T.C.H. I've dreamt it up and developed it and tried it out with all sorts of audiences over the last few years. And surprise, surprise, each of those letters does stand for a different technique or insight. And we'll see, we'll work through them in turn, and then we'll see how that works for you. Some of the techniques will really, really work for you. You think, great, I can really do something with that right away. Some of you might think, yeah, okay, I get that, but I don't quite see that, doesn't work for me. That's okay. Pick and choose what you want, what's most helpful, all right? But those are the 5 areas that we'll just touch on as we go through this. A couple of them we'll spend more time on than the others, particularly the P, the first one, the P of pitch. We'll spend a little bit more time on that than the others. So let's see how we go. First up, again, just give some thought for a moment for whatever it is that you are choosing to focus on and have in your mind. Let's just imagine that you did have 30 seconds or so to pitch that. Just give some thought to a moment for how you would go about doing that. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just in your own head. If you want to jot it down, that's fine. But what kind of things would you say? Just whilst you're chewing that over and having a think, I'm just going to ask Marika to, if you're there, Marika, just to talk. Just give me a bit of a summary of what we have out there in terms of areas of focus for people.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Yeah, we've got quite a few answers here actually, so I'll read out a few for you. There's a couple of people who actually have a pitching event coming up next week, but there was no more detail on that. Then another one. They're looking to provide seed funding and training to budding social entrepreneurs in sub-Saharan Africa.
Right, okay, yeah.
Another one, pitching to employers to help them attract disabled candidates.
Yeah.
Also pitching my social enterprise to others. I currently provide consultancy to other social entrepreneurs. My product, IT sessions for adult users.
Okay.
Pitch holiday activities, sponsorship to corporate companies. Music workshops as team building activities. My social enterprise, Birmingham Doula, supporting women to have a better pregnancy and birth.
As the father of a 4-week-old baby boy, I can certainly relate to the value of that on behalf of my wife, that's for sure.
Oh, congratulations. On the sort of side here.
That's about 7 or 8 different bits. That's lovely. Thanks very much indeed.
Yeah, so that's and there's a few more, but that hopefully gives you a bit of a flavour of the range of different kinds of things that are coming through.
Lovely, and what wonderful breadth there is. Thank you to each of you who responded in there. I know that we haven't got logged all of the ones that were referenced that you pinged in, but that's great, lovely. Okay, so that gives a bit of an idea, and so we'll see as we go through if we can just pick up on some of those as examples for these ideas. Let's just regroup here in terms of the classic starting point for when it comes to a pitch. Now, I'm just going to give you this a very brief equivalent or version of my pitch in its very earliest form as a draft. And this is the kind of thing I suspect which most, if not all of you, will have done. I'm not pointing fingers here. I haven't met you, so I'm not saying this with prejudice, but in my experience, and this is working with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in the corporate world, in the social enterprise world, charity world, and so on, most pitches, in other words, in response to the question, so, you know, what do you do and what are you about, say something like this, and this is, yours may well be much better than this, but my early version started out some years ago, something like this. Well, my name's Simon Bucknall. I run a business called The Art of Connection. We run spoken communication skills courses, we deliver coaching, keynote talks where relevant, and we work with audiences across a very, very wide spectrum of society, ranging from a member of the cabinet at one end through to young people in schools at the other, and everything in between, MBAs, entrepreneurs, charity workers, police officers, and so on. And it's all about public speaking and the spoken word, and that's what we do. I hope none of you have logged out yet, but if you were beginning to doze off partway through that, frankly, I don't blame you. The problem we face with that kind of explanation, it's the equivalent of here's what we do, let me give you a breakdown of, you know, the offer we have, the courses we run, who we work with, you know, larger organisations, you know, the number of people working for us, how many countries we're based in, all that nonsense is not really very interesting. The basic problem being, as a listener, you may well have found yourself thinking, well, so what, Simon? So what? Bully for you. Well done you for having a public speaking company and running courses and blah, blah, blah. Good for you. And so what? Who cares? That's the challenge we face, the so what question. Whether you are engaging a potential investor or whether you're engaging people who may wish to join your team or may wish to purchase your services. You know, a corporate, for example, looking back on this list here, who are thinking about perhaps holiday activities as part of a corporate away day. You know, so what if your company does A, B, C, and X, Y, Z? The trick is to circumvent that question, and the best start point for that, I suggest, is for you to think about problems first. What many people make the mistake of doing is describing the features. Hello, my name's Simon Bucknall and I run a business called The Art of Connection and blah, 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 blah. Who cares? My advice to you is that we really focus on meaningful problems first. Now let's just look at that in a bit more detail. I would like you, if I may, to consider a tube of E45 cream. There it is, there you can see it, lovely, excellent. I remember a while ago I was doing a session for the NHS up in the northeast and we had 3 dermatologists in the room. They almost had a heart attack when I showed and profiled E45 cream. Nonetheless, there it is. And when you look at that, my hunch is that we can agree that that is a product. Yes? Can we agree also that it is a solution to a problem? Let me ask you this, and again, feel free to ping these through on the chat function to Marika. What problems would you say that E45 cream is responsible for dealing with? Just ping them through. And Marika, if you could just chip in and just give us, you know, a handful of responses as they come in. There it is, cream treatment for dry skin conditions. What problems does this cream help to tackle?
Okay, we've got dry skin, eczema, self-confidence, low self-esteem, relief to symptoms, another self-confidence, dry skin, yeah.
Dry skin, yes, lots of dry skin out there, yeah. Okay, great, lovely. Yeah. So there's some really good answers. Let me read you what it says on the back of the tube of E45 cream and the implications of this for how you articulate the value of your workshop offering, the support you provide to pregnant women, the seed funding and the benefits of that for social entrepreneurs in sub-Saharan Africa. The implications of what I'm about to read to you are profound. Here we go. Clinically proven. Go the dermatologists. Shame on you. I said, no, it's not about efficacy. We're talking here about the communication of this value. Clinically proven to treat and soothe a wide range of dry skin conditions, including, now listen up, here we go, dry, itching, flaking, chapped skin, sunburn. Did anyone mention sunburn, Marika? I'm assuming not. Detergent hands. Yeah, you muted yourself. Yeah. Detergent hands. Also recommended for use in more serious dry skin conditions such as eczema. I think someone was sharp enough to spot that. Yeah, eczema, dermatitis, ichthyosis, and certain cases of psoriasis. Now, if you tot those up, which I know you won't, but if you were to, you would find those are 10 distinctive little bits of pain, little problems which the producers of E45 cream are suggesting may be relevant for you. And of course, therefore, as a result, you would buy the cream in the hope that you will alleviate those conditions in some way. And there you go. Down the left, you can see a whole series of those problems. And on the right, you'll see a whole series of different solutions, or if you like, to use the marketing language, benefits that the cream will bring. So as a result of dealing with this cream, using this cream, you will get smoother skin, cooler skin, comfort, relief, clearer skin, younger looking skin, hydrated skin, refreshment, greater confidence. People picked up on self-esteem as being one issue. Very nicely done, absolutely. For some people, that's absolutely it. Why would you want to go on a hot date looking like you've got snowflakes all over your face? So there you've got a very simple breakdown of the value of the product. The essence of the value of this product, the point here is, lies in its capacity to solve problems, or if you like, to alleviate pain. What if you were to treat the value of your enterprise, service offering, product? What if you were to treat the essence of the value of that as a set of solutions to a set of potential problems? And what if you were to start with the problems first, in the hope that those may be relevant and ring some bells for your listener? Put another way, you could think of it as painful problems. There we go, there's the symbol for pain. The pain and then the pleasure that comes from alleviating. Same like pain, pleasure. So my strong advice to you is that you identify, pinpoint problems early in your pitch. And what that gives you, therefore, problem or problems first, is the opportunity, instead of starting with, well, my name is Simon Bucknall, I run a business called The Art of Connection, blah, 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 is instead to say something like, well, public speaking, communicating under pressure is a really, really big challenge for many people. All sorts of things happen. Mind goes blank, face goes red, stomach churning, failure to achieve impact around the boardroom table, difficulty in securing funding. So what we do as a business is help people to get better at that, so they can feel more confident, so they can project themselves, engage an audience more meaningfully, succeed at interview. Do you see how this works? It's just a structural change. Pain first, or problem first, pleasure second, or solution second. Just have a think for a moment, and you might even, if you have got a piece of paper in front of you, just draw a line down the middle of the page, just like that one back up there, and think to yourself, right, draw a line down the middle of the page. On the left-hand side, what sorts of problems will your product, service, offering, enterprise help to tackle? If I look at this, I think to myself, goodness me, seed funding for social entrepreneurs in sub-Saharan Africa. My goodness, I can only imagine how much talent there is in sub-Saharan Africa and how much poverty, and yet it's the difficulty of alleviating that, because the talent simply doesn't have access to funding, because they are written off by banks or written off by potential investors because they're not big enough or whatever it is. There you go. There's some meaningful pain right there, for example. Or indeed, the emotional stresses and strains of pregnancy. I mean, goodness me, as an observer, you know, with my wife, we've just, as I say, my wife's just completed pregnancy for our second child. You know, the emotional strain of that. 9 months is a long time, and physically it's very, very tiring, and there's all these challenges, and of course there's always the concern about health and whether the baby's going to be okay or not, and chat. That's meaningful pain for people who are either experiencing that or for some reason have an interest in that area, so perhaps say an investor. Identify meaningful pain for your audience, and you may have to do some guesswork. Okay. So here's the little piece. So there you go, you heard the example there. Let's move on then to the I.P.C.H, inject in motion. This is an insight, and this is something which you can do, but it's an insight, an observation, something to consider. This will be quite brief, this one, but remember this? Notice the emotion in this visual. There's happiness, there's joy, there's excitement, there's intrigue, there's all those emotions at play. That's powerful. In my world, when I think about the pain that people experience when it comes to struggling with public speaking, this is the kind of thing I picture in my head. There are too many people out there for whom public speaking is worse than death. It's the last thing in the world that they would want to do. You've got to get emotional about the pitch. So if you identify meaningful problems and solutions that are relevant to your value, then it becomes possible to get emotional about that. For me, it really bugs me that there are so many people who fail to achieve their true value or potential in this world because they're terrified of speaking up. That bothers me, whether it is a teenage. I was in a school last night down in Brighton. You know, there were some very, very quiet girls in the room. That bothers me. Likewise, when people turn that around, I was coaching a lady who's got a Mother of the Bride speech to give this Saturday. You know, she started off really a little bit unsure and a bit timid about the speech. By the end, she was, oh, I think I'm going to really enjoy this. I love that. So the emotional connection you have with your value is vital. It's something that you will show people. Just one example, the World Championships. This is me receiving an award for the UK and Ireland evaluation skills competition back in 2009. Now that's a fairly standard standard photograph, me receiving the award. There we go on the stage from the the governor of the contest organisation, Toastmasters International. But now let me show you what that really meant. It was a really emotional experience that I really, really wanted to do well in the competition, and it meant a huge amount. Let's say this was 4 years ago. That's the emotion of it. That was the payoff, if you like, that I got from all the work that I put in to develop my skills. And that's the kind of emotion that I tap into when I see people succeeding in the work that I do. The emotion, the injecting emotion for me from the benefit or solution point of view is the excitement of seeing people who can connect with an audience, project more confidence and so on. I think you get the idea. So that's where we're getting to inject some emotion into this. Yes, too many people in this world struggle with public speaking, and it's painful for them. You get the idea. Get the emotion in there, because if you don't get emotional, frankly, why should anybody else? Alrighty, let's move on. And the T in pitch, tapping into their world. Now, there's someone I have to thank for this and acknowledge for this insight, because really it comes back to a fabulous speaker, a man called Craig Valentine, 1999 world champion of public speaking, tremendous speaker based in the States. And he talks about a technique called tap and transport. Tap into your audience's world and transport them into your own. And I kind of adapted that and thought, well, how can I use this in relation to pitching? An answer is to tap into their world. If you like, cross the bridge, as it were, into their world. Now, if you identify meaningful problems that are relevant for your audience, by definition, that's what you're doing. You're tapping into their world. But you can take it a step further. It's not just about articulating relevant problems. You've got the opportunity to really hit them between the eyes. There's a poster that may be familiar to you. Your country needs you. Just notice how that really picks you out from the crowd. And in particular, I'd like to draw your attention to the use of language. What do you notice about the use of language in that poster? Feel free, just ping 1 or 2 responses through there. It might seem very obvious, it may not, I don't know, but just ping them through. America, if you've got any, if you can report back on 1 or 2 of the responses we're getting, what do you notice about the use of language?
Okay, our first couple pick up on the word "you," very bold. There's no word "I" in there. It's succinct, it's short. It personalizes the message to the reader.
Absolutely, lovely. Now, if you overuse the word "you," of course it can get a bit preachy and a bit patronizing and a bit annoying, but it's a fabulous word to tap into your listener. It's a fabulous word to use to reorient the relevance of your value so that it's focused on your audience or listener rather than yourself. So what does that mean? Americans know a good thing when they see it. So, it's looking for life World War II, I think, although if you're a sharp historian, you may pick me up there. But still, same principle. I want you. There you go. It's a tremendously powerful word. One little thing I suggest you Google after this seminar is just Google the phrase 10 most persuasive words. A man called Cialdini did some work on this, as well as a variety of universities and institutes, looking at the most persuasive words in the English language. Words like free, discover, safe. And you is right up there. It's a fabulous word for connection. So let's just look at this. And there is an element of crystal ball gazing for this, because you have to, in some ways, have a guess, have a crack at imagining what might be relevant for your listener, for your audience. You may know it for a fact, but you may just have to take some educated guesses. But notice the difference in these 2 versions. Here we go, tapping into their world. I'll just give you an example here. So if you remember earlier, the first draft of my pitch was, well, you know, hi there, my name's Simon Bucknall, I run a business called The Art of Connection, and what we do is this, this, and this, we run courses. Notice how it's all I and we centric. Whereas when you start to think about tapping into your audience's world, then it starts to sound a bit different. So just have a listen and see what you make of this, because if you think about people that you work with, perhaps friends of yours, family members even, chances are you'll have met some people who find public speaking challenging. And you may know what it's like yourself. You know, it can be difficult articulating value and projecting confidence under pressure through the spoken word, because the pressure's really on and it causes all sorts of problems. Your mind goes blank, face goes red, whatever it is. Do you see how suddenly that's become you-centered? rather than I-centered. So pinpoint the problems you think are relevant for the audience, get some emotion behind it, and make it you-focused, particularly in that first half of the pitch where you're identifying the problems. Then, once you've done that, you can link to what you do. So what we do, or what we offer as a business or as a social enterprise, is support for women going through pregnancy so that they get access to the expertise they need, or the support network that will make a difference to their state of mind. So that what we do is help to connect individuals in some cases very, very deprived parts of sub-Saharan Africa, so that they get access to funds that can really enable them to get a new venture off the ground. So what we do is help to show organisations and employers quite how and why disabled people have a fabulous role to play and value to bring, even to organisations who don't think that they do. You get the idea. So make the first half more you-centered so that you can then link into what we have to offer. Choice of pronouns, really powerful way to tap into their world. Let's look briefly at credibility. Credibility is one of those things where it can be tempting to give chapter and verse. You know, lots and lots of long-winded explanations about how, why you're amazing and blah, 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 blah. I suggest here it's about quality, not quantity. It needs to be concrete. If you can find a better visual of someone pouring concrete, then do let me know, I'm all ears. But it's got to, the thing about credibility is it's got to be concrete. It needs to be a noun rather than, we're really great at doing this, or it's a bit wishy-washy. Make it concrete, specific, crunchy. I'll give a couple of tips on how you can do that in a moment. But it could be, for example, a particular qualification that you have. It could be that you have a particular number of years experience. In my world, for example, I find myself having to reference the fact that I've twice won the UK and Ireland Championship of Public Speaking. That's something which I don't say to try to show off to people, but it's a bit of the credibility that I can offer because it is concrete. It equally could be a story of some kind. Now, it depends how long you've got to pitch here, but stories are tremendously powerful as a way of showing your value in action. So earlier you may remember I mentioned or referenced the lady who was giving a Mother of the Bride speech, and she started off really a bit timid, and she ended up actually really genuinely saying, I think I'm going to enjoy this. There's a little story. Do you see? It's a little bit of credibility that helps to make the point. What stories could you draw on? Now, at first it might feel a little bit rough and ready. There you go, little bits of coal. But your experience, stories from either other customers you've worked with or experience you've had, think of it as like little lumps of coal. Coal because that experience is, by definition, concrete. It has substance because it's happened and you can talk about it. What you might find initially is that it feels a bit weird communicating it because you're not used to it. And believe me, I at first found it really weird talking about the UK and Ireland Championship of Public Speaking because I kept feeling like I was showing off. And it really felt a little bit odd. But over time, you'll find that it does start to smoothen out. And if you stick at it, if you stick at working on and practicing the 2 or 3 most concrete bits of expertise, you'll find that sooner or later, they start to come across like that, rather than as a lump of coal. But it does take some work. Okay? So when it comes to credibility, think about qualifications or years of experience, or perhaps there's a particular model you use, perhaps there's a particular network you're able to tap into and access, or perhaps there is a story, a case study if you like, that you can reference which shows your value in action. As I look at the sorts of needs we have out there, sort of chunks of value, I can imagine all sorts of scenarios where you could reference people who have in terms of pregnancy, women that you have provided support for, or workshops that you have delivered for people, or particular holiday experiences that you've delivered for people. what is it that you can use to give credibility to your pitch? In my world, the most common ones that I use are the UK and Ireland Championship of Public Speaking. I reference sometimes individual people that I've worked with. Reference, for example, say coaching a member of the cabinet through to working with young people in schools and everything in between. Notice those are nouns: member of the cabinet, entrepreneur, charity workers, police officers. Nouns are important. All right, we shall move into the final little section here, which is all about the next step. So it's one thing to have tapped into meaningful problems and solutions for the audience, giving it some oomph, some emotion, and you've tapped into their world and you've introduced some credibility, and that's great, and you've got the audience or the listener thinking, wow, this is great stuff, how exciting. The question is, what happens next? Far too often I meet people who think that the next step is something like this. It's an enormous leap. If you were Neil Armstrong, it's the giant leap for mankind. If you were to talk to a spy, I suspect you won't, but if you were to talk to a spy, they would probably say to you something like this. Asking someone to spy against their country, that's a really big step. That's a big ask. Our job as spies is to break that big step into lots and lots of little steps. That's how you get progress. If you go in and pitch to a, let's say to a funder, you're at a pitching event and you're there and you're hoping that you will secure a new client, it's quite a big ask to deliver a pitch and say, if this sounds interesting, then come to me with a check made out for £500 and let's do a deal. Or even in a conversation, you meet somebody at a networking event and you talk it through, and oh, that's really interesting. It's quite a big ask then to say, right, well, let's book you in for a session, shall we? It doesn't work that way. It takes steps. I used to work in politics, and one of the lessons I learned with grassroots campaigning is that if you go and meet a volunteer or somebody who's keen to help with a campaign and you say, that's brilliant, and here's 1,000 leaflets to deliver, or here's 500 phone calls we'd like you to make, they lose interest pretty quickly. If instead you say, well, how about this little baby step? If I give you some leaflets just to deliver your street, could you do that? It's about 80 leaflets. Would that be possible? Much, much easier to say yes. If you meet somebody at a networking event, or if you pitch, let's say, we have some people out there who have a pitching event coming up, what is the next baby step you would like people to take as a result of them hearing your pitch? It probably won't be them giving you money. Lots of other things have to happen first before they hand over hard-earned cash. So if you like what you've heard, just come and see me afterwards. We'll exchange business cards and then we'll take it from there. There you go. You've got their business card. You've got their details. That's a step that they can action. Might be more ambitious than that. The point is to get really clear on what the next step is that you would like the people in the room to take, and to be really clear on that. Because it's very tempting to take it for granted that your audience knows what they should think, feel, or do next. They don't know that. You need to make it really clear for them. So there's the flow. Problem first, inject emotion, tap into their world, credibility, and help them to take the next step. And in the spirit of that, let me suggest to you a next step that you can take if you found this helpful. One is you can choose to review this webinar and listen to it again. I'd love for you to do that. The second thing is that if you like what you've heard, then I would love for you to drop me an email just to say, look, really appreciate it, was great, because obviously I don't have you, we're not connected directly here. You might just drop me an email and say, look, it was really helpful, thanks so much. And if you're willing to give a brief testimonial, that will be fab. However, what will be valuable for you? Well, another option is just to go to the website and you'll see that you can sign up to receive a roughly monthly newsletter. All it consists of is a simple, high-impact article on a particular aspect of communication. We call it Speak Soon, and it's literally an article. It's not a big newsletter with lots of stuff. It's free, obviously. You can unsubscribe whenever you want, and we use MailChimp, so you may well be familiar with that software. So you just get access to some free expertise over email over the coming months, as long as you choose to receive it. There's a next step for you if you liked what you've heard already. Notice what I'm not saying is, please call me and let's book in £5,000 worth of coaching, because that would be a bit of a big step, wouldn't you agree? So that's the flow. I'll just come back to the overall flow there. There we go. I just wanted to just give an example of what of what a next step is in this situation, so that I'm demonstrating what I mean by these techniques. Let's see what questions, if any, you have. We've been running for about 40 minutes, so I hope you're still with us and you haven't dozed off. Marika, if you can field questions as they come in, that would be great. But ladies and gents, do feel free, and I will do everything I can to give you as helpful an answer as possible.
That's great. Thank you so much, Simon. So let's wait for those questions to come through. I also put in a little chat message as you were just talking there, so give people a couple of minutes to come through with their questions, hopefully. But thank you. There's first one there. Let's start with that. How do I stop my body and voice shaking when I get nervous? A nice and easy one for you to start with.
Yeah. Marika mentioned that I've done a webinar before for UnLtd. I love UnLtd. We've been working together for a number of years now, since the very early days of my business. And last year's webinar was all about public speaking demystified, and we looked at this. Best advice I can give you is before you go up to speak, so maybe you're backstage or you're on the front row or you're in the waiting room or wherever it is, before you go in, you need to get some deep, good quality breathing in. And the key to that is to tip your chin down. Feel free to do it right now if you wish. Put your hand just above your waist and tip your chin down as if you're trying to touch your throat with your chin. What that does is straighten up your airway, and then if you keep your shoulders level with your chin down and breathe in, you should find your shoulders and chest remain where they are, but that your diaphragm expands and your stomach moves out slightly. That's what's called a deep breath. And that breathing will help to settle the adrenaline, which is what's causing the shaking. It's adrenaline pumping through the system. It's not nervousness, it's adrenaline. Good quality breathing using the diaphragm, and if you do yoga, that's great, is the best way to manage, not eliminate, manage the adrenaline and the symptoms of adrenaline, which is very often shaking. Just a second tip for you is to remind yourself in that little slot before you go up to speak of why you're there. Nervousness becomes, well, it's adrenaline, not nerves, but it becomes much, much more of a problem when you worry about them. Nervousness can only really be a problem if you are focused on or worried about yourself. Oh no, I'm shaking, oh, and go, what if I go red, da, 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 da. That's when nervousness becomes a problem. You're there to be of value to the audience. So remind yourself, it's not about you. You are there to be of value to them. So that's a mindset point that can help with something like shaking, because bluntly, your audience doesn't care whether you're nervous or not, doesn't care whether you're shaking or not. They care about whether you've got something of value to say. Focus on the value and take some deep breaths.
Great, thank you. A second question, Simon. Do these tips that you've given us apply when approaching potential funders also by email?
Yes is the answer. You don't have to do them in chronological order. I paused just because I was thinking about emotion. Emotion quite hard to convey via email, because if you try to use emotive language, then it's a little bit tricky. It can sound a bit overblown. Certainly, the youth. Okay, let's just take these in order of relevance and importance. Tapping into their world is certainly important. It needs to be addressed. It needs to talk to them rather than say, an email that says, hi there, we are a ABC and what we do is XYZ and we think that you'd be great people to invest in and blah. That's really very we focused. So instead, the same principles can be applied. So in an email, for example, probably rather more compelling to say, well, look, having reviewed your website, it struck me that you're looking for opportunities to do A, B, and C and to tackle X, Y, Z. Given the work we do, it struck me that it might be worth us making contact. Do you see what I mean? So you're tapping into their agenda, whether that's the pain or the pleasure that they are involved with first, and then link to, I think given that, it would be useful for us to meet or to have a conversation, and then you can use a bit of credibility and take the next step, because we are an enterprise focused on delivering X, and we think there could be a fit. would love to take 5 minutes on the phone to talk it through with you or arrange a 10-minute meeting. There you go, there's the next step, for example. So, yes, I think you can. But obviously the exact phrasing that you use in an email will likely be a little bit different than in a spoken word pitch. The biggest difference will be that your email should be much, much shorter. I was in a session with some sales experts a little while ago, one of whom is a real expert in speculative emails. And his advice was 5, maximum 6 sentences. Bang, that's it. Because your first email is not about securing investment or funding. Your first email is simply about not getting it sent into the trash and securing a telephone call or a meeting. That's all it's about. You'll scare them off if you do too big an ask, but it needs to be really short. I so often receive speculative emails from people looking to either work within the business and any host of different reasons, offering to redesign my website and all that rubbish. When I say rubbish, I mean as in I don't need it redesigned because I'm very happy with what I've got rather than websites rubbish. Websites are vital. And your pages of detail, I just delete them. So really short and punchy.
Great.
How's that?
Great, thank you, Simon. There's another question which sort of probably speaks to a little bit to the same answer that you just gave, but I'll read it out anyway and see if there's anything additional that sort of brings up for you. So any tips for contacting potential customers for the second time? So perhaps you've met them at the networking event, you've got their business card, and then you're actually now following up on this sort of second contact. Any additional tips on that?
Yeah, well, the biggest tip I had for that is to structure your first sentence carefully. My strong advice is that you use a formula that sounds something like this. Dear, let's say it's Marika. Dear Marika, you may remember we met last week or a month ago at the X event. We talked about Y and exchanged business cards. It struck me that it would be worth, and then off you go. Notice that you're starting with, you may remember that. May remember, not you'll remember that. You may remember that we met at, and be specific about the event. You may remember that we met at the Live Unlimited networking event 2 Saturdays ago. Be really specific, because when you're more specific like that, it becomes much harder for them to ignore. If you say, we met a while ago, don't know if you remember or not, notice very generic, much easier for them to think, no, I don't really remember, so I'll just carefully ignore that. So be really, really specific about it. Reference that common ground you already have is the point, and then make it clear about what it is that you are suggesting to do next, and briefly why that is.
Thank you.
I hope that answers that question. I think it's the best I can suggest in that.
Yeah.
By the way, once you're into a second contact, you are so far ahead of where you would be with a first contact, it's unbelievable. The difference between it being second contact versus first contact is enormous. The first contact is always the hardest. As soon as you've got some kind of response, you're up and running. Couple of thoughts on this. The first is when you exchange business cards, treat them as a hot potato. In other words, they're hot when you hand them over. They cool very rapidly. So if you're going to act fast the following day if possible. I find myself literally coming back from events from time to time that I go out to rather less than I used to because of family, but proactive networking events, and I will literally send emails that night. Second tip is comes from a lady called, make sure I've got her name. Oh, I need to remember. I need to track down her name. Oh, blast, name escapes me. Anyway, a lady who specialises again in selling into big corporates, and she made the observation that communications activity in large organisations is just so heavy. There's so much traffic that her experience is that people will expect to need to make 7 or 8 attempts before you finally get a breakthrough. In other words, just because you get thrown back once doesn't mean you shouldn't try again. There are even some people, organisations, who will literally ignore the first couple of attempts just to see if you're serious or not. So persist. Politely, but persist.
Okay, thank you. I think I've got a lot of notes here saying thank you, great webinar. But I don't think I've got any more questions. There was actually, if we don't get any more questions, then there was one person who as you were explaining the tip for controlling your voice and your breathing, and you were talking about the chin, I don't know, I can't quite now remember what you said about the chin, but they missed that bit as well. So if we don't get more questions, would you mind, Simon, repeating just that
Yes.
tip that you had about managing your
sit up straight or
yeah.
stand up, and for most of your life your head is up, you know, you're looking ahead of you for most of your life. This may feel a bit weird, but tip your chin down or your head down as if you're looking down at the floor or looking right down the front of your body. And you need to feel almost as though if you're a guy, your chin is touching, you're trying to touch your Adam's apple with your chin. Or if you're a lady, you're trying to literally touch the top of your chest with your chin. It straightens up your airway. May not feel it, but it does. And it makes it much, much easier then to breathe as nature intended, which is deeply using the diaphragm rather than high up in the chest. Many people think that a deep breath means almost like a gorilla, you know, kind of arching back and then, you know, filling your lungs and the chest expanding. Actually, chest expanding is very unhelpful. What you want is the diaphragm below your rib cage to expand outwards, to allow the air to flood into your lungs. So tipping the chin down is the key to that. Put your hand just above your waist, and as you breathe in, you should feel your stomach expand a little bit. It may not feel like a deep breath, but it is. And that will help settle the adrenaline, the butterflies, and also give a firm foundation for your voice.
Okay, thank you for repeating that. We have had one extra question at least. What about making a joke in a pitch?
Yeah, avoid making a joke, or rather, cracking jokes is a very risky undertaking. If you've honed, practiced, tried and tested a joke or something humorous, then fine. But many people, I find this with a lot of the best men speakers that I coach say this, I've got to make the speech funny, it's got to be funny, got to be funny. What jokes can I put in? The best humour doesn't come from jokes you put in. It comes from things that emerge from what you already have. I know that sounds a little bit weird, but it's just true. Humour to work needs to be authentic. Just putting in a one-liner or bolting in somebody else's gag that you cut and paste off the internet, in my experience, is very risky and rarely effective. You don't have to make them laugh early on in the pitch. What you do need to do is to put them at ease and relax them. So if you are having the opportunity to pitch or present for a bit longer than, say, 30 seconds, you know, maybe you've got a 10-minute presentation, for example, then my advice is that very early on in the first 30 seconds or a minute, forget about trying to make them laugh. You don't have to be funny, but put them at ease. And the easiest way to do that is just to be polite, be conversational, as you would do when you normally meet people. So when we came online here, when Marika introduced me, notice that I did not say, "Good afternoon, welcome to the webinar on effective pitching. We are going to cover the following 5 areas." It didn't start like that. It was more of a kind of, just to reassure you, I don't have red hair, and 45 minutes sounds like a long time, doesn't it? I mean, goodness me. And it does sound like a long time, by the way. You know, so my job is to make sure this is really worthwhile for you. Notice that I'm talking about some common ground. We're all looking, or we were all looking at that picture of the red man, or the guy with the red hair saying welcome. So that's some common ground. What common ground do you have with the audience? Start with that. You know, and it might be as simple as, well, look, lovely, I really enjoyed coffee and having a chance to chat to a few of you just before this meeting started, and fabulous to have the opportunity to be here to meet with you. I know that so-and-so and I, we spoke over the phone and then we exchanged some email. You're just making polite conversation in the first 30 seconds or so to build rapport. Then once you've done that, that's when it gets serious and you start going into identifying the problem. But if you do that right up front, it's a bit weird. If we were to meet for the first time at a networking event, it'd be a bit odd if I came to you and said, you know, shook hands and said, "As you know, public speaking is a big challenge for many." You'd be like, "Who are you? This is weird." You'd be more likely to say, "Hi, how you doing? My name's Simon. What's your name? Can I get a coffee?" You know, polite chit-chat. That's the way to break the ice with an audience rather than trying to crack a joke. Unless you're Jimmy Carr. If you are an aspiring comedian, fine, put one-liners in, but they're risky.
Okay, brilliant. We've got 5 minutes left and I've got 2 more questions. So we'll go through those and then I think we'll draw it to a close. First one was about, would you recommend including, or is it okay to include extra information in a form of an attachment, a flyer, etc., when emailing new contacts?
It depends what you're emailing them for. So I don't know if we can get a little bit more information on that. If you are approaching people, prospects, for the very first time, and they are, maybe potential customers and potential investors, my suggestion is that email, that first contact or approach, needs to be really, really brief, and it needs to be as easy as possible to digest. Please don't make it hard work. I think, honestly, my experience is that attaching extra information is rarely that effective. Sending out a mass email to loads of people speculatively is a bit risky. I think because attachment, you've got to open it, and then you've got to kind of make sure you zoom in right. What I find is more effective, if I want people to do something other than just reply to my email or pick up the phone, is that it's more effective to include a link to something very relevant. For example, I made an approach to an individual just recently where we'd had a conversation before, we had a bit of contact before, and I was just reconnecting. And I put a note, I hope all well, obviously we spent some time together a few months back. Just thought you might be interested in this article I wrote recently on public speaking. It picks up on something we talked about. It's in the Mirror, critiquing the Prime Minister's speech. Thought you might be interested just to have a look. Now, that was just me in that case. I had an article in the Mirror that I directed them towards the link, and they did look at it, and then they did follow up and so on. I think having a link to something is a little bit more friendly than an attachment. That's my advice. I wouldn't say there's a right or wrong. I can only express a view based on my own experience. Attaching things starts to sound like hard work. You want to hook their interest first, and they'll ask for more information when they're interested.
Right. Thank you, Simon. And then the final question, and it's actually quite nice to get this question, particularly if people have been apprehensive about public speaking. But this is, if I wanted to do more talks, how would I start getting myself invited to speak at events?
Yeah, good question. Well, the first thing just to consider is how much speaking you're doing already. If you're not doing very much at all, then the first thing to do is you need to get out speaking, irrespective of whether or not you are being invited in. In other words, if you're going to run a marathon or run a race, you need to get some training in. So stage time is everything. There's a man called Darren LaCroix, 2001 world champion of public speaking. That's his mantra: stage time, stage time, stage time, and with good reason. Join a Toastmasters club is my first piece of advice. Google Toastmasters International for your local area and find a club, check it out. If you are a young professional, i.e. quote-unquote definition of young as far as this organisation is concerned is under 40. If you're under 40, it's worth checking out JCI, Junior Chamber International, big network for young professionals. There are speaking opportunities both in terms of training courses, and also they do have speakers come in depending on the chapter. I was the president of the London chapter last year. So if you have something of value, they may be interested in you coming in to speak to members or to run a workshop. So that's an option. You can look at Rotary. Rotary International, that's typically you give a short talk after dinner. There are clubs all over the world. Some are great, some are less great. They're all different. I did a few. It's quite a good experience just to get out there and reach people who are engaged in doing things for the community. So that's a good environment. You might find the local Chamber of Commerce. Lions. I've heard people talk about Lions. I haven't spoken at Lions. It's a network a bit like Rotary, but that's another option. So these are all environments, forums, which provide opportunities for you to speak. I should just emphasize Toastmasters is different from the others in that Toastmasters is an environment in which it's a club format. So it's an organization you join in order to practice and develop the skills in public speaking. They host the World Championship, which I had some success in some years ago. The most important step I took in developing my public speaking was to join a public speaking club, which I did after that first nightmare experience in my first job. So the key thing is to get out there so that you get some experience in front of audiences. You could even approach local schools. If you're doing something imaginative that's entrepreneur related, my hunch is, having been in lots of secondary schools over the last few years, is that there's a real interest in bringing in external speakers to talk about interesting stuff. So I think that if you were to approach a load of local schools, there's a good chance that at least one of them will say, yeah, I'd love you to come in and talk to our business students about what it's like setting up your own business.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much. And it is now 1 o'clock, and we said we would close. So, and I know you all, including Simon, I'm sure, have other things to now to go to. So a big thank you, Simon, for your time, and thank you everyone who listened in and who participated throughout. We had really good responses to all of the things that we asked you to comment on. So shows you were really engaged. Unless, Simon, do you have any final words? I'll just wish everyone a really good day.
My last final word is focus on what is relevant for your audience and listener. And as a next step, do have a look at the website and have a poke around if you'd like to. You'll find some more resources on there. I'd love to hear from you.
That's great. Thank you very much, and everyone have a really good rest of the day and rest of the week. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.